Hello, welcome back to Warhammer 40k. We're going to talk about something a little bit different, breaking away from the standard unit reviews that we normally do on the channel. This time we're going to be talking about winning with scouts. Now scouts aren't commonly chosen, partly because they're now an elite selection within this edition, whereas in past editions they were a troop option, so they were more commonly chosen within army lists. So this video is basically going to explain why you should still be choosing scouts when you're doing your army build. So the simple question for this video is, can scouts win you games? And the answer to that is yes, they can. And we're going to explain why. So within their datasheet, there's a couple of abilities that are really key for your scout squad unit. The first one is the concealed positions ability. So during deployment, you can set the unit up anywhere on the battlefield that is more than 9 inches away from the enemy deployment zone and enemy models. So now you're already probably thinking, well, infiltrators can do that, incursors can do that, but those kind of units are 21 points to 24 points a model, and you're going to need a minimum of 5 of them, so you're talking about 105 to 120 points minimum for 5 models there. Whereas if you're taking the scouts, it's going to cost you 140 points because you're going to need 10 as a minimum. But this brings me on to the second ability within their datasheet, which is the combat squad's ability. So when you do take the 10 models, you can split them up into 2 units of 5, so that will effectively be 70 points per unit. And now when you're talking about the secondary objectives, you've got 2 lots of chances to score them. So yes, it does become slightly more expensive taking the scouts over a 5-man infiltrator squad or a 5-man incursor squad. But as we just mentioned, you're going to get 2 units of 5 operating completely independently from one another, as opposed to one single 5-man unit that can only do 1 lot of objectives per turn. Now there is another ability within their datasheet which is also very important. It just depends on which one you want to use. We've already mentioned concealed positions, but the other one is the outflank ability. So during deployments, the squad can be set up behind enemy lines instead of setting them up on the battlefield, and if you do so, then in the reinforcement step of one of your movement phases, you can set them up wholly within 6 inches of any battlefield edge and more than 9 inches away from enemy models. It's very similar to Deep Strike, except you are slightly restricted. You've got to go from 6 inches from the battlefield edge, but that actually works perfectly fine when we're talking about the secondaries. So we're going to go over some of those secondaries now to explain exactly what these scouts are going to be doing. So the first one, which is retrieve victorious data, that's the one you definitely want to be taking if you're taking scouts. So it's an endgame objective, it's an action for an infantry unit, and you can perform the action within your own movement phase, and you've got to do it in a table quarter that hasn't yet been done, and you've got to be more than 6 inches away from any other table quarter, and the action will be complete at the end of your own turn, providing that the unit is still in that table quarter. And if you do so, you're going to be scoring 4 victory points if you've done it within 2 quarters of the battlefield. You'll score 8 victory points if you've done it in 3 quarters, and you'll score 12 victory points if you've done it in 4. So right off the bat, with this single unit that's combat squadded into 2 units, you can very easily be scoring the 8 points there, and doing so in the most difficult quarters, which of course is your opponent's side of the board, because that's where they're going to be outflanking. Of course you can also use the concealed positions ability as well, but that will take a little bit longer because you need to be 9 inches away from the enemy deployment zone in order to do that. Which is still doable, but on the smaller games with the smaller map sizes, it may not be as doable because of that 6-inch restriction from other table quarters. Now this is going to pair quite nicely with a couple of types of secondaries. 2 that are pinpointed out here, which are battle supremacy secondaries. One of them is engage on all fronts, so you score 2 victory points at the end of the turn if you've got 1 or more units that are wholly within 3 different table quarters and more than 6 inches away from the centre of the battle. And then you're going to be scoring 3 victory points instead if you've got 1 or more units wholly within each of the table quarters. So that's all 4 quarters there. So you've got the option of that one, but I actually prefer another one which is behind enemy lines. So you score 2 victory points at the end of the turn if 1 unit of the army is wholly within the opponent's deployment zone, and you score 4 victory points at the end of the turn instead if there are 2 or more units within that same area. So again, as we've already mentioned, there's going to be 2 5-man units of scouts that should be behind enemy lines, which will score you 4 victory points within that turn, and it happens within your own turn, so there's no way of really denying it, unless of course they've screened off the entire deployment zone. But with outflank, you don't need to be doing it early game, you could be doing it mid to late game, so the later you do it, the less likely there's going to be screening units within your opponent's deployment zone. So out of those 2, behind enemy lines is the one I'd probably select. Then we've also got to remember the primaries, the take and hold primaries. Potentially you could be coming in and going directly onto a primary objective. Now it's not likely going to be happening early game, but if you're going to be bringing these guys in from reinforcements sort of mid to late game, then those primary objectives may be uncontested, and therefore you could be scoring 5, 10, even 15 points every single turn for your primaries. Of course, they're not going to be scoring 15 points on their own. You will need help from the rest of your army, and likewise with the retrieve victorious data, you will need help from other units within your army as well. if you want to be getting 12 points as the maximum for that secondary objective. So what this all means is in a single turn, if you've got help from other units within your backlines, you could be scoring 12 points for Retrieve Octarius data, which will maximise that secondary. You can't go any further than that, but that's totally fine. The scouts on their own are going to be scoring you 4 points just from that secondary there. Once you've actually done that, that headache is gone. You can just focus on the other primary and secondary objectives, and you can also be scoring 4 points behind enemy lines all within a single turn. And in the following turn, if these guys did survive, which they may not survive, but if they do, you could then repeat the behind enemy line secondary, scoring 4 more points, and then you've got the potential of scoring 5, 10 or even 15 points on your primaries. Now what is likely to happen is they're likely going to be dying on that turn. However, they're going to be tanking a lot of shots from your opponent's army, partly due to 2 things. First of all, they've got the camo cloaks, so it's going to be a +1 to their armor saving throws, which will put them up to a 3+ armor save. And if you've actually managed to get them into terrain, which would be quite fortunate for you, but you could still get them into terrain, that will put them on a 2+ armor save, so it's going to really tank a lot of range attacks from your opponents. Then there's also the smokescreen stratagem, because we've got the smokescreen keyword. So for a command point, you pop the stratagem and it'll be a -1 to hit for your opponent to target those scouts. Now you can't use this on 2 squads, so it will only be the 1 squad that will be smoke screened, but you've got that up your sleeve if you needed it. But all in all, you're talking about 140 points, and you're gaining an absolute boatload of points very early on, or it could be very late on, but you know they're in the bag if they're coming from reinforcements, because there's absolutely no way that your opponent is going to be able to target them while they're off the board. So there's 2 ways of doing that. You can do it from turn 1 with the concealed positions, or do it with outflank mid to late game. Now we do need to also talk about another unit that's within the codex, which is the Eliminator Squad. These guys are actually coming in at a cheaper cost of 75 points for 3 models, so that will be 150 points total for 2 units there. So the Scout Squad is 140 points, but once you put those camo cloaks on, which are 2 points per model, it's then going to come to 160 points. As for the Eliminators, they've also got the Concealed Positions ability, so they're going to be able to be set up, but more than 9 inches away from enemy models, as well as 9 inches away from the enemy deployment zone, which is the actual important part there. They've got the advantage of having a 2+ ballistic skill, they've got 2 wounds as opposed to 1, they've got 2 attacks as opposed to 1 as well, and they've got a 3+ armor save as opposed to a 4+. And then on top of that, of course, they're Primaris as well, so they're going to interact with the Transhuman Physiology stratagem if needed. And then to further add to their datasheet as opposed to the Scouts, they've of course got their Bolt Sniper rifles, which are very versatile, as you've got 3 different profiles when using them. But the one thing they are lacking here though is the fact that they've not got the outflank ability. I think that's the main key here, is the outflank ability, because if you're using that ability, you could be scoring Retrieve Octarius data within your own turn without having to survive a single turn, which you're not likely going to be surviving. But if you did want to take that risk, you will be saving 10 points, but you really need that outflank ability to be scoring these points much easier. So for me, that makes the Scouts quite a tactical option when you're going for your secondaries in particular, as well as your primaries of course. They can be scoring your primaries if you get your outflank ability done correctly, and it of course depends on the mission as well. You could just literally stroll straight out onto a primary objective, as well as doing the 2 secondaries behind enemy lines and retrieve Octarius data. So that's my take on how to win with the Scouts. Do you agree with me? Let me know below in the comments. Also, like and subscribe if you found this video useful. We want to be doing more of these tactical approaches within our videos now. And as for today, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.